Hey, welcome to this week's episode of the Drivetime Podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Barker, and I'm joined today by Andy Gray, who's the CEO and CTO of Kortical. Welcome, Andy.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks, Jackie.
Good to see you. So we're going to have an hour of geeking out on AI. And I know when I was doing the research for this episode, I looked at some of the content you put out, and I know it's very technical and it's designed, a lot of the content you put on your website is designed for technical people. And I think for the purpose of today, we're trying to unpack some of the AI sort of buzzwords and help OEMs, retailers, people working in automotive understand how AI has evolved to where it is now, and then how they can start to think about their strategies, because there's a lot of overwhelm, frankly, in the industry. People don't really know quite where to start. So I think if we can get to a place today where you'll explain a bit about your world and then they can hopefully adopt and learn some of those lessons, that'll be a fantastic.
Sounds good to me. I mean, even me trying to keep up with what's going on, I sometimes get a bit overwhelmed as well. So
yeah, it's going at such a pace. And you mentioned that, in a lot of your content, it's evolving so quickly. So just going back, you founded Kortical like nearly 9 years ago now. But before then, you've kind of...
Before AI was cool.
Before AI was even a thing. So tell me a little bit about you, Andy, because you've obviously always worked in technology. It's your thing. So I'd love to know a little bit about what happened before Kortical and then, and how you kind of got into the space in the first place.
Yeah, well, I think I was just... I didn't have to do Irish in school, so I'm Irish, and I didn't have to do Irish in school because I'd lived outside of the country for more than 5 years. So they left me in the library with a computer, and then I just sort of tried to figure out things, and it didn't have the internet, so I was like, what can I do? And I just started to unpick how it was working, all this sort of stuff, taught myself to code at 14, then just sort of from there, like also loved video games, wanted to make video games, was trying to figure out how to make that work, was also just sort of dreaming of never having to do chores ever again and thinking, how can I make a computer brain? you know? And I mean, if you saw my designs back then, they're embarrassing now. But, I kind of had that passion, that idea about doing it. And then when I went to university doing computer science, they had this one module on neural networks. And they basically sort of started off with Marvin Minsky and saying, he showed that these things don't work, move on. And I just sort of was like, hang on a second, they look so interesting, looks really cool. So I kind of got really focused in on that and kind of kept that passion, went into video games, was trying to work on AI and video games, but then there's one deterministic, like predictable behavior. So they don't want you to do cool, fancy AI techniques. And then actually when I went into banking, then they were more open to, they're just going, yeah, as long as the money goes up, whatever you're doing is fine. So they were actually more open to trying AI techniques and stuff like that. And then we just sort of saw that the time was right about 2014 where the technology was in place, all these sorts of things, and thought it was a really good time to jump ship and really sort of build our own company and get focused on AI.
Okay, wow. So what I heard there was bored at school, built a computer brain to avoid washing up, doing the chores, putting the bins out. And then from that, I think the really interesting things there as well are the gaming industry, because actually gamification, a lot of social media is engineered on human triggers. So dopamine hits, how you gamify, the little mini wins, keeping engagement and keeping people kind of hooked. I mean, I've got 3 sons. Trust me, getting them off their devices is fun. And then from that into banking and finance, which again is sort of built around human touch points and trigger points. And from that into AI. So going back into gaming, when you kind of went from bored teenager student, self-taught coder, which is fantastic. I love the idea that when you're bored and curious, you delve into something and you learn about it. Where did you find your resources when you were that age? What was available to you then?
Yeah, so I started playing around with Logo, which was like an old program that sort of schools had, and I'd been bored in an art class and thought, I think vanishing perspective is just dividing by the z-index. And so then I thought I can code up 3D. So I basically went in, used Logo, made some 3D stuff there. And then the maths teacher came in. I was like, oh, look at this. And he used to work for Microsoft, and he just shook his head and walked off. And then I didn't think too much of it. And then a week later, he comes in and drops a book on like Introduction to C++ and a coding test. And then it was like, okay, here we go.
So he obviously saw you had the right brain. When he said he shook his head, he was thought, oh God, we've got some kind of genius here. I've got no chance. Brilliant. So I have no idea what half of those things mean. I'm not going to lie. So, but it's all, I suppose it's coding talk and engineering language, which you speak fluently. And I think it's really important to caveat that, engineers speak in a coding language, and that is just understanding how, like, you learn to read, you're decoding a squiggle. You learn to read music, you're decoding a different squiggle. So your brain recognises symbol equals action. So I think that's probably the way that my brain interprets what you've just said. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just like anything. I think once you, like, probably when you work with music, you hear like Mozart could visualize an entire symphony, in his head. And I think when you get used to programming, you can see the output. So I can see a screen with an app, and I can think exactly through how that would work. And, that's what, I think anybody who gets deep into something, if it's music, whether it's coding, that's, yeah. So it's language. It's kind of...
It's knowing how it's built.
Yeah.
So it's just good. It's fascinating. It's a really fascinating topic. And again, it's something that you've obviously gone so deep into. So from school into gaming then, what was your first job in gaming, and were you kind of designing games? What was your role?
Yeah, so actually, my first job was a game designer. So I came over to London. Well, I could go to 3 countries. I could either go to USA and LA, or Vancouver in Canada, or London. And they're the 3 places that were making video games. So my sister was in London, so I thought, right, I'll go to London.
Yeah.
And then I sort of managed to volunteer at the Game Development Conference Europe, was basically harassing everybody who was attending who owned a company. I was like, please give me a job, please give me a job. And somebody relented. And so then I ended up getting in as a game designer.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to be a coder. And what I didn't realize is that game designer is actually the most coveted role in video games. That's basically where you get to go, I'd like the game to do this, and then other people scurry around and actually make all the code, do it, and all this sort of stuff. And I just didn't realize how good I had it, and I was just like going, no, I want to do the technology. So I sort of, moved from there into doing the technology, into doing all the coding stuff. And like, to be honest, I love coding, so
yeah. But you have I suppose you've got the best of both. You've got the vision of, I want it to do this, and then I'm going to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So that's really, that's rare, but it's quite a great skill to have, isn't it, to have both?
I think actually, yeah, especially when you're trying to do your own company or trying to build your own applications, being able to think through what's this user experience, how are people going to engage with it, and then being able to see that all the way through to actually design, build, and the technology behind it it's quite useful to be able to bridge all those levels, basically. Yeah.
And I think it's a skill we see obviously emerging more now with people graduating now. Obviously, you kind of graduated in the earlier iterations of technology and computer science, and it's now people are coming out. And you mentioned earlier on, actually, it's going so fast. I think people are coming out of uni and the tech is kind of it's overtaking what you're even covering in your curriculum and in your studies. So you've got to really stay on top of stuff, or use AI to stay on top of stuff, because that's, doing all the work for a lot of people. So then when you went into banking, what on earth made you leave gaming, fun, designing stuff into financial services?
Well, I'd made some really cool games. So I was lucky to work on Burnout, which was like a #1 worldwide bestseller. We kind of got like a BAFTA and Metacritic and stuff. That was really cool.
Nice.
Then worked on Black and some really cool games. And then they got me working on Monopoly. And and then I was like,
Every Christmas nightmare.
It's actually the highest selling game I ever made, but I didn't really love the game, but I realized that actually it's really more the technology and coding that I was passionate about. And then I had some friends who sort of moved into finance, and they were getting to work on cool technology and getting paid about twice as much. So I thought, I love what I'm doing. Let's jump in there and try that. And then actually what I found when I moved into finance was that they were really more open to doing the advanced AI techniques and all of that sort of stuff. So that was actually, I got to do more fun technology in the finance world, which is really cool.
I think we're probably so used to now. I remember back in the day, I used to go into my branch and they would know who I was. And now I do everything I literally do everything on my phone. I can move money around from that place to this place. My kids need money regularly. So but it's a simple click on my phone. And that, I think probably what you were working on was how you migrate the data from the book to, it's like, obviously originally it was in a big ledger. That's how banking worked back in the day. So you've taken it into a digital format, and now it's in an accessible digital format, so it powers all of those applications that consumers need.
Well, I was actually on that side. I was more on the investment banking side.
Right, okay.
So it's basically sort of, can you figure out the future price of an option better than other people are figuring it out? Can you basically calculate the price in 6 microseconds rather than 300 microseconds, because then you can be the first one to place the bid, you win, all that sort of stuff. So it's all about sort of algorithmic trading, risk, calculating risk and just doing it all super fast. at scale. So, I mean, we'd have like 80,000 computers processing trades overnight and doing all the risk calculations so they'd be ready by the time the markets open in the morning to do more trading. So it's all, yeah, it's kind of just the scale of what they're doing and how they're doing it is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's mad. It's insane. So yeah, I mean, I went from the very simplistic view of, how you kind of have things on your phone, but now I suppose people are trading on their phones, and the stock market's up and down. How do you work out compound interest? All of those things. You can do that. Actually, you can do it in real time, can't you? So you can start. I was playing last night because my boys are just coming out of education into work, and they're asking me like, what do I do about saving and how do I do it? So I sent them all. We have a family group chat. How do you work out compound interest? And you can flex up and down. If I increase it by 5% a year or 15% a year, or if I start with this much or that much, and it instantly gives you how much money you'll have in 20 years' time if you do this. So that's exactly that, isn't it? The use case is I want to forecast forward what something will be worth. You're doing obviously in real time with trading, with stocks and shares or whatever. So, but that's the ability that the tech can then provide you with the data that you want or the answers to your questions that you might have. I suppose.
Yeah. I think like with that sort of compound interest calculation, like that's like a fairly straightforward calculation. Whereas actually when you're sort of trying to predict future option prices and things like this, they use like physics heat diffusion mathematics. So it's really complicated mathematics that actually like that the calculation for like compound interest can be done almost instantaneously. Whereas these ones would be sort of, a million times more complex. And so they'd have so many moving parts, and then you can use AI to start to, so when people are doing these financial predictions, they have this thing called, they have to simplify things and say, oh, there's this volatility, this sort of thing that we don't know that sort of moves the market
fluctuates
around.
Up and down, yeah.
And then you can use AI to sort of go, well, can we actually try to predict which way that will fluctuate and like layer them into sort of the standard mathematical equations, try to predict things a bit better, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's blowing my mind right there. But it's but I suppose then you took all of that knowledge and the ability to predict in real time and like faster than the next person or the next company was doing it, so that you've got the ability to buy at the right price and respond in the right way. So actually the machine learning knows when to buy something because it knows it can predict the fluctuations of a stock or a share or an option that's going to happen. So quicker than a human. Much quicker than a human. So it's doing all of the thinking and the prediction and the action before you even have woken up and had your first coffee.
I mean, they're buying like millions of pounds worth of hardware, sticking it in the room next to the trading centers with a huge cable and trying to get that sort of edge so that their algorithms. So you're not beating humans; you're actually trying to beat other algorithms. So they're trying to sort of have that sort of 2 microsecond advantage, so their trade goes in first and they win, and then that sort of each I think they sort of said that each microsecond is worth about 100 million in advantage. So yeah, with the stock exchanges, it's a race of, it's already an automated race of the machines, and that's sort of the finance world and the world of banking that we've had. Because there's so much money in that space, where I think what we're starting to see is more of a democratization of that technology, where it's not only these crazy banks that have huge amounts of war chests of money to throw at a problem, but now it's more accessible to more regular businesses to actually try to use some of these techniques, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? But like, war chests of money and big buildings full of computing. It's like, God, that's mad. So, and obviously we, in automotive, we're part of an automotive industry that is funded by, the banking sector. So there's associated, there's lenders and leasing and all of that. So, and that's based on modelling future values of vehicles. So you've got to have your finance will be based on the guaranteed minimum future value of an asset that you've still got no idea really how it's going to perform until you get to that point. And whatever's happened between now and then, it could be up or down. You could, so it's there's so many different varying factors. But that's fascinating. So then when Andy, you mentioned you kind of moved to London because of your sister, and then you founded a business with your sister, which is really interesting. And we're going to get Barbara in for the outtakes episode. I can't wait for that. So you've got co-founders, family business. So how did you think of the, I know, we'll launch a business doing this? How did that, just talk me through the story.
Yeah, so actually there's a third co-founder, Alex. So originally it was sort of, I met Alex at bonfire night, and we got chatting, and then he sort of talked about AI, and at that point it was just so interesting. About 2012, interesting to meet someone else who was into AI. He was doing a PhD, and I mean, I'd never seen someone who'd done a PhD in modern AI, so we just instantly clicked. And then we were talking about what we could do. Initially we were looking at actually out predicting the market using AI techniques and trying to seeing how it would. If we could set up a hedge fund type thing, and then we just realized how expensive that was. So we thought, okay,
let's do a hedge fund. Oh no, a bit pricey over the burger and the firework night. Yeah,
we're like we've proved we can out predict the market. Like now we need investors, and it's like that needs to So that just was a bit too much. But then we started to have a few more ideas, and then initially what we looked at was in the call center space. So can we get people to the agents who are dialing out, can we match them to the people that they're trying to sell to? And so if you have someone from the home counties calling into Scotland, or you have someone from Essex calling into Scotland, maybe the Essex person does a bit better there. Or maybe, if you're calling, so just can we match the different people, different backgrounds, different ways of communicating to customers that will prefer each? Can we figure out who to contact when? So if it's there's, if you can figure out sort of like an area full of the stay-at-home mums, then maybe contacting them at sort of 11 o'clock is going to work really well. Contacting someone who's in an office at sort of 9 a.m. on a Monday is probably not going to work so well. So it's basically like using AI. Can we basically determine for all the different postcodes, for all the different areas, when would be the optimal time to contact someone, and then basically using their data. So actually that's one of the things that we've so then that was sort of like how we got started, and that's actually something that we're applying in the automotive space today. But then from there we started building out a platform for generally predicting a lot of different, to help people automate the creation of AI models. So basically a lot of people didn't know how to train one of these things, how to deploy it, and all these sorts of things. So we basically created a platform that simplified all of that stuff. So it's just APIs, kind of the way OpenAI works now, almost, where you can kind of go, can I get a prediction for that? And it just sort of returns it. And then we started working with it across a whole bunch of different sectors, and from sort of retail with Charlotte Tilbury, tax automation with Deloitte, and then sort of automotive with Kia, Hyundai, and a whole bunch of other brands as well.
So it started out then looking at how do you predict when either a voice or a type or a demographic can speak to somebody else. So it's like outbound calling, call centre kind of behaviour. What's the difference? I'd love to know if there's an easy definition between machine learning and AI, or is just one a further iteration of the other?
So AI is a term that was coined by John McCarthy back in the sort of 1950s, and it was basically to do with the area of research where you're coding a computer and you're trying to do it in a brain-inspired sort of way. So sort of
think like a human, basically. Yeah.
So kind of like, rather than sort of thinking from a rules-first approach or from a problem-first approach, you're thinking, how does a brain work? How can I make a computer sort of simulate what a brain does?
Yeah.
And so then, so kind of AI is this hugely broad term. And basically the thing is that as we define things, so kind of like when optical character recognition became a thing, people were kind of going, oh no, that's not AI, that's optical character recognition. So it's sort of like this sort of moving goalpost of AI, because as soon as something's well understood, people go, oh no, that's not AI, that's just X. And even John McCarthy was basically saying he's the first one to notice that it was a shifting goalpost.
So optical, say that again, optical.
So optical character recognition. So that's basically like when you'd print out a sheet and then the scanner would scan it in and understand the letters, basically.
I was thinking, is that when your phone holds it? You've got Face ID? So there's so much terminology, isn't there, that I've never heard of some of these terms, and I've worked in digital for a while, but there's so many different facets of technology that are, like, you'll geek out on this for a long time, and I'm like, I have no idea what some of these things mean. But I don't need to know, in my job, I don't need to know what it means. I need to know who knows how it works, and that's when you bring in the right specialists for each of those things. So, sorry, Karen, so optical character recognition, so you talk about John McCarthy. So
basically, I mean, just AI is this umbrella term for everything that's just brain-inspired, and it's just a moving goalpost. And those people tell you, oh no, that's not AI, but just as long as it's brain-inspired, it's AI.
That's the way you can coin it then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then basically, machine learning is like much more specific. So what that is typically with programming, you're creating instructions, which are essentially kind of rules. So if you wanted to, let's say, recognize a character or do facial recognition or try to do text to speech or something like that, you'd have to try to create tons and tons of little rules about how you'd transform sound waves or little bits of a picture or all these sorts of things, and try to build up to something that worked. And we had like decades of generations of PhDs trying to build on each other's work to try to get to sort of a level of these things working, and they never quite worked. And then what we did is we basically flipped the whole paradigm on its head and said, if we just get all of the data and get really clever algorithms that can learn from the data, so rather than us coding the rules, it learns the rules from huge swathes of data, can that then give us good outputs? And actually it was sort of like optical character recognition, signature recognition, number rating. Those were the first things that we sort of saw that, aha, like this stuff can really work. And then sort of since then it's progressed into, now sort of LLMs and ChatGPT and all that sort of stuff. And so, if you're looking at sort of facial recognition, we could never, like no human could code up the rules to be able to recognize faces as well as the AI can. So it's sort of gone from a point where the rules are so complex and so subtle that it is a bit like magic. Like we don't quite understand exactly how it works. Like we can get in and we can kind of go, oh, that weight and that number goes into that probability and everything. But the sort of whole sphere of complexity that's encapsulated in these models, I don't think sort of anyone really fully understands.
No. So the computer learns from itself. I think when you talk about people that know how to train it, I wouldn't know. You kind of imagine like a dog. I click it and I give it cheese and it sits and waits until I tell it to move. But it's quite different, isn't it, training an AI bot, because it's learning, it just keeps learning from itself. But that's really fascinating. So anyway, so you thought, I know, over a chat over fireworks night, you got chatting to someone, and that then led to, oh, I think we should do more of this. Or just sort of talk me through kind of how you went from there to setting up the business and getting Barbara involved. And
yeah. So basically, like we sort of catch up fairly regularly, and then like that we were sort of spitballing ideas, and we're just sort of so excited about AI, and and then we thought, well, actually, Alex was already part of another startup with some other guys, and then we started working on that, and then we realized we were the only ones who were doing any work.
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
So we thought, how about we drop those guys and then just do something ourselves? So we started doing that, and then sort of Sapient sort of were looking for people who knew about AI. And so it was one of these sort of times where no one knew anything and suddenly customers were asking for it. So we suddenly get plucked out of nowhere, out of relative obscurity, to go and sort of advise like a major high street bank on their AI strategy and starting to implement all this stuff, and then getting involved in, actually delivering these things. And that was the sort of start of Kortical. And then Babs happened to be on maternity leave, and we just needed to help with a bunch of stuff. We were roping her in more and more and more, and then then she became a full-on founder.
Brilliant. Yeah. I can't wait to talk to her. Actually, I'd love to live a dynamic in your HR boardroom. If things don't get, if you have an argument, like who tells who on who. So it should be fun. So when you founded the business, you mentioned that you worked with banking and Sapient and other people. So a lot of your background knowledge and development was working on, I think when I was looking at your website, and also we had a call the other day, other research that I've done on AI cites that there's quite a high failure rate, because often you need to have your data in the right kind of way and it has to be accessible. And we've spent like 2 years migrating data out of systems to make sure that we can then build APIs around the data so you can perform tasks to do stuff. So you've got to be able to perform something with that data for you then to be able to use AI or automation so that thing can learn from itself and do other things. So data is really important.
Data's everything, but I think, well, and in some ways it was more important than it is now as well. So it's kind of interesting. But I mean, to machine learning algorithms, data is everything.
Yeah.
But now we also have some of these pre-trained algorithms where they come with a whole lot of smarts already embedded, which kind of sometimes lowers the amount of data that you might need to do something. But sort of, I think if you're trying to sort of think about how to understand it, there's basically kind of, in some ways we call it, I think of it almost like the art and the science. Basically the art in machine learning and data science is about how you take data from sort of that you capture about a business and then translate that into the sort of zeros and ones that need to be understood for a machine learning algorithm, and then basically translate that back into business value. And there's a lot of art in how you do that. And I think the thing is that there's not a lot of well-established patterns, so a lot of people who haven't got that level of familiarity kind of really fail just at the hurdle of just not knowing how to go from this to this and back to actually making value. So I think that's sort of like a really key part of the process. So I think sort of, the sort of the magic that you do to transform the data is probably almost more so, it is equally as valuable as the sort of data. But I think the automotive space is really rich in a ton of data. And I think also the other sort of myth, I think, is that a lot of people think, oh, we need to do this huge data project to centralize our data before we can take advantage of AI at all. And actually, like, where we've seen things probably be more successful, it's like, that's great if you have it. But actually, by just kind of looking in your different silos, in the different bits that you're doing, there's probably a ton of different things. So like with the renewals AI that we're doing, where you're sort of looking at how can we predict what someone would likely buy next. And if you're looking at sort of like when would be the right time to contact them, well, you don't need to have the full sales chat that they've ever had with anyone. You kind of just need their agreement information, a little bit of an overlay, and then you can get started with that and do something quite cool. So I think, like we're seeing like an average of like 7.8% uplift from really personalizing the outreach, and that's with sort of a silo of data rather than needing that whole joined up set, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think we see what we're working on as well is how do we help unsilo the industry, because I've worked in automotive for 30 years and it's still the fleet department don't always talk to the retail department, who don't talk to the after sales and parts department, and they don't really talk to marketing. You're like, maybe you could, join it all up, and actually you don't need to have, like you say, the whole chat history, but you need to know what are the trigger points, what are the likely areas when, if I come in for a service, you can then see age, condition of vehicle, finance situation. So you can look at what's left in the finance agreement, what's the equity in the vehicle, and you could potentially remarket that vehicle you could even get a valuation real time and build a deal around me before I've even come back to pick my car up. So a lot of those things, the data is available to be able to do all of those things, and it's just press the button and off you go.
Yeah.
And then add on what you've mentioned, like the probability data around when am I likely to want to renew, or what are the other trigger points? Can you bring in things like social media engagements? So what am I looking at? What else am I, like, I've had a baby or I've moved house, or what are the other kind of factors that might mean that I might change a car that you'll then target me earlier or at the right time?
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing. It's sort of like we've had the success we have had within quite a limited silo of data. But if we were to get, let's say, more into the dealer management system, and then we're able to see what did they actually show them that recommendation? Like, how long did they look at it? Did they engage with it? And then we can start to feed all of that data back in. Then the predictions will get smarter, the results will get better. But then even as well, like you're saying, is like if you're then able to tie all of this up to the advertising, then you could say, right, well, actually, can we start to attribute what we're showing people, to on their buying journey, and then what ads were actually effective in causing the outcome? Because actually with machine learning, you can then say, right, here's all of the things I showed these, 100,000 customers, and then you'd say which ones were in common, so which ones are the ones that are really working, and what how's that working, and do all this sort of attribution. And then you can use that to optimize what you're doing. So you could basically optimize everything from they landed on our website, we sent them all this content, then we did the reach out and we reached out to them in this way, then we timed all of the things to get them into the test drive, did the test drive, do the follow-up. Now they've got the agreement. Now, as they've got the agreement, we're doing all this nurturing as it's going along. And all of that can be fully optimized if you have that sort of fully joined up world, which I think sounds really cool.
It sounds really cool. And it's like we should be doing that, but we're not. It's not quite connected yet. But you're right. I think attribution is one of those areas where it's very difficult because there are so many different, I think I heard someone say like 200 touch points potentially to buy a vehicle, because you're kind of logging into and out of so many different systems or websites, or then you might, read a review and then do something else. So it's how do you tie it all up together? And it's all basically usually through one device. So you could potentially look at, this IP address is just on all of these different things. And we know that from our propensity modelling, that's the magic spot there, is like, do it there, because you're more likely to convert when you do these things. But it's all about learning, and then like you said, the game, going right back to gaming, you're always beta testing and learning, but you haven't got to do everything at once. But you're just looking at how do you get that microsecond advantage from like the banking background to be able to get in there before the next person. And it can just be sometimes the speed by which you look after a customer or the way that you respond with them.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like, people have got so used to the sort of Netflix and Amazon model where, the product you want, they've kind of got something that's recommended with Amazon's choice here, or, Netflix is like they're serving you up content you like to see. So you don't really end up looking up the review sites as much, and you don't really do all this. So if you can actually, show people the right product that they kind of like, and they start to trust you to be showing them the right products, then you can kind of keep them in that ecosystem, drive up the renewals. And then if you're sort of expanding that out to say, right, we're actually going to incorporate some more of this data, then you could just say, right, well, like using remarketing, so we kind of know they visit our site, so we know who they are, and then we can basically say, right, well, actually, can we put them in this group where they're going to see, a nice picture with a review saying 5 stars, da 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 da. So it just reinforces all the stuff that they're already thinking, and they think, oh yeah, this is great, and I'll just go on this journey, and they won't really start doing that broader exploration, and then where they might go, oh, actually, that new Chinese car looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen such there's been a real kind of, explosion of choice now. People can buy so many different things, and so the comparison is an absolute minefield. People, and that's the challenge. There are loads of tabs open. You're trying to compare one thing with the other thing, and it's not easy to try and bring it all together. It's quite challenging. So I think actually that's where we had Scott Gens in the studio a few weeks ago, and he was talking about consumers are now turning to AI to ask AI what car they should buy, because they're just like, I don't know, what does ChatGPT think? I'll ask it and just see, or can it help me? And so the next sort of job for retailers is your site ready for AI to ask it a question? Because obviously we've spent time educating people on SEO and how to optimize each of those individual stock pages to perform with a Google search. And now you've got to kind of optimize it for an AI search, or do you have video? Are you on TikTok? Are you la la la? So it's just, there's so much coming at retailers now. It's like, oh my God, I've got to think of everything.
And the new thing that's in the pipeline is the model context protocol. So this is basically where you're giving tools to, let's say, Claude or ChatGPT. So then when they connect to your site, they'll now suddenly be able to, find out, oh, I can go and ask it for deals, or I can, book a test drive, or I can do this sort of stuff. So by being able to, expose these things, you can have it there. Someone could just stay inside ChatGPT and be like, yeah, like book me this test drive. Here's my details. Boom, and it's done. And they wouldn't even need to visit your site. So it's like, how do you make your site, LLM friendly, as well as basically having sort of like, all of the bits. So if
agent friendly.
Yeah.
So we kind of had Tom on the very first episode said there was this, and I haven't seen the clip, but it's like the agent is doing the booking of the test drive, and then it finds it's talking to an agent, and they're just going to go, oh, should we talk in computer speed? And it goes, like the fax noise. But it's like, I don't need to talk to you in English. We're talking in computer language. It's a whole different code. Let's just speak in that. So ones and zeros. So yeah, it's mad, isn't it? So so kind of coming around then, one of the things that you mentioned on your site is that AI has something like an 8% success rate based on how much you get data right. So what's the advice, or how do we help retailers think, okay, I've got to think about how I get my business ready. I don't want to spend loads of money to have only an 8% success rate. What can they do, and how can they start to think about, because we think about staircasing, do one thing well, then do the next thing, and then do that very well, and then do the next thing. So what are the first steps into AI that, because you mentioned Claude and ChatGPT, and these are all kind of agenty types, services. So just explain where you think they should start.
Yeah, so I think with the sort of 8% and the 30, so it's like 8% success rate and an average of 36 months to get to production. So if you multiply those two things together, you get an average of one successful project every 20 years, which is not
scary.
Something that
I mean, not great outlook. You kind of go, oh, that's not great.
Yeah. So, but I think the where you can massively accelerate that is if you're using proven technology. So if basically, rather than trying to say, oh, these are the models, or we're going to build our own agent, or we're going to do all these things, if you're basically saying, right, like, what's already working and how do we adopt that, then I think that's obviously the easiest way, because if it's already working in someone else and it's doing the same thing and you're going to adopt it there, or, if you're using people, if you're using people who actually know what they're doing, have done a lot of it successfully, then I think that sort of can help you have a much higher success rate as well. But I think for most people, it's probably, the cheapest, most effective way to adopt AI is going to basically say, right, what solutions have been proved out, or what solutions are extensions on something that's kind of already working, and then sort of incrementally adopting that. And I think sort of, you see a lot of people trying to do these big bang projects, and actually usually what we advise is actually do a smaller roadmap. Basically like look at your organization, create an AI roadmap, look for where you're going to get those like high value quick wins, because usually in any organization there are a couple of things where it's like, oh, that's not even that hard and it's quite easy to do, and that's going to provide quite a bit of value, so let's start there. And I think sort of taking that sort of lean approach, doing incremental delivery where you do something, see that it works, then layering in the next things. I think that's really how you'd sort of make a roadmap that actually is going to work, rather than sort of do these big bang projects or, I think
rip out everything and rebuild it. No, don't do that. That's too much. I think you're right. It's like starting with, and quite a lot of the senior teams that we work with are super experienced in automotive. They know their industry really, really well. And I think this is where we're looking at how do you really think about the big sort of buzzwords for us at the moment are like cost out and efficiency in. So how do we, the first thing could be, I need to understand what systems and processes I'm currently running. And then how do I look at where do I have duplication? We obviously see a lot of, we're ingesting data from OEM systems to be able to surface that in a dealer management system or through the retail space, through e-commerce sites, which are relying on stock or using new and used. So actually, I think there are lots of elements, like you said, it's not doing everything. It could just be, I'm going to make sure I've got my pricing right, or I'm going to think about how I improve retention, or I want to make sure that people can book their servicing online. So that's my first thing. And then start to maybe simplify what they've got in their systems landscape, work with a company that's already got something, they know what they're doing, they've done it before, and it's not going to be terrifying. I think often though, Andy, people in automotive, they're so used to, they know what good looks like if they're building a dealership. They know how to, spec it out and make it look beautiful and create the human experience. And I think that's the bit where there's a real passion for having the human experience. And I think that's the bit, where do we take the AI brain, kind of, humanistic brain, into the actual humanistic experience, the real human experience. So we know that consumers do a lot of their research online and then they walk in and they expect you to know what they've already done. And of course, until you've got everything joined up, you don't know what they've already done. So I think there are those sorts of elements that we've got to try and help the industry just feel more confident when they're building out their kind of digital strategies and then layering on AI strategies. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we have is like we've got the AI chat. So basically, if you're a dealer and you're looking to, get more into the AI space, I think if you're having people fill out forms, that's rather impersonal, so actually with this you can actually infuse a lot of your brand voice in. So you actually customize it to speak with the same tone of voice, the way that you do. If you wanted to pull in narratives or stories, you can sort of feed those in, so it can really start to sound like the people that they will meet when they go to the store, or to speak with that sort of brand on their voice. So that can be really quite highly curated experience, and it can feel natural. Because I think when a lot of people think chatbot, they still remember the sort of, the adventure code sort of like pick option, X, Y, Z. And it's like, well, no. I just want to ask this completely different question. I think sort of the modern AI stuff, it's really free-form text, ask it whatever you want. It can then go into the back end and do useful things and like booking you services and things like that.
Finding stock as well. I think often, we used to see really terrible experiences where a consumer would ring up and say, oh, I've seen the advert on Auto Trader, is that thing, I love the, Audi A3. And the agent with the salesperson go, oh yeah, no, sorry, that's sold. And you're like, oh my God, how much other stock have you got that might be quite similar to that within your network? And I think that's where we've seen real kind of advances in quality leads coming through. By the time they walk in, the AI bot has already said, oh, great, and what have you got now? And let me help you value that. And so it can do so much of that. While the salesperson's busy dealing with the other human in the showroom and, helping them into their next vehicle, the AI can start to really streamline through and qualify real-time leads with actual stock, with pricing. It can do all of that. I think that's where it's really exciting. That
because I mean, like you're plugging into the back end. So let's say you're plugged into Keyloop, then you actually have access to the DMS and also like what stock's available. So then when you're pulling out the recommendation, someone's like, oh, I'm interested in buying cars, you're just pulling out the ones that you actually have in stock that they can actually buy from. So it's just, that's already part of that experience. And then, like you say, sort of you can then have these tools as something that is available to the salesperson. And I think, when we move more to this sort of assistant approach, so that maybe the salesperson has their own assistant, then they'll be able to hand off a lot of this sort of work rather than sort of sat there and be like, oh, wait a second, I'm just going to deal with the computer, or even just wasting a bunch of time, doing a bunch of outreach that's really kind of standardized and all this sort of stuff. Let the AI do those bits, they can spend the time speaking to people, doing probably what they prefer and doing something that adds more value for the business as well.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that's really exciting. So just thinking about them, because you've worked across some really massive projects. You mentioned working in banking. You've also done sort of big projects with Deloitte or the NHS. So these are kind of really massive, massive projects. How can we help retailers think, I'm not as big as the NHS, I don't have that kind of budget. But what would be, I know we've sort of mentioned like looking at just simplifying it, but from the end of this, what are the actions that you think somebody running a multi-franchise site or that's just new to AI, where can they go to start to learn more, feel more confident, know what good looks like? Are there any resources that you think, do you know what, I found this great thing, I learned loads from there, I recommend obviously listening to this podcast and recommending it to everyone, clearly.
This podcast is amazing.
It's amazing. We're going to say that. It's great. But the whole point of it is actually to try and make it more accessible, because tech is so, I think if you're used to doing the job that you've always done, or you're really passionate about, the job that you do and it's brilliant, but you want to feel more confident if somebody mentions tech to you, or you want to learn more. I think that's just how we help like signpost other things that are quite useful resources. So
my first port of call is actually ChatGPT, right? I
Right.
mean, it's so good and it has access to so much information. And also for me, I think the thing is that typically when you'd be searching the web or when you'd be trying to find things, you would see some information, but you wouldn't be able to sort of question it or rephrase it or test your knowledge. Whereas now you can be like, okay, so if I've got that straight, da 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 da, and then I can be like, no, actually, you got this bit wrong, da da da, and then okay, great, and then you feel like you've really kind of, got to grips with something and understood it. And also, if you're trying to do something, you could say, hey, actually, I want to get in this space. I'm not sure about it. Could you give me an initial plan? And it can actually help you with an initial plan. So I find it's actually like amazing for just getting started in like whole areas that you're not so comfortable in, or that you've got less familiar. So I think sort of that's a great resource. But I think if you're just sort of thinking about, okay, what have we learned from some of the other applications of AI that we've done? I think that actually, if people are trying to think about their business and what they can do, I think if you're thinking about processes that people are doing that are fairly repetitive, so if it's sort of the same type of information in roughly the same format, or it's it's digital in, digital out, then that's potentially a process that can be automated. Then it's probably thinking about, right, well, actually, if you look at around your business, I mean, one of the ones that we were looking at was people were finding out, well, actually, we're just not contacting a bunch of these leads. We only have so much capacity with our salespeople, and so they're going to take the people that they see have these really strong signals, and there's a whole bunch of people that reach out that they just never contact. And it's like, well, if you're using AI can contact everybody, and maybe some of those people that didn't look great, maybe actually if you talk to them, you'll find out that they're actually quite a high sale. And also, if you're going to leave someone, wait more than 5 minutes, the likelihood of them buying, like, have you seen that? There's that sort of research that shows like after 5 minutes is like 30 times less likely to buy.
The conversion rate drops off so much. So I spent a bit of time working for a telco. I was freelancing when my kids were small. It was brilliant because I freelanced for about 10 years in different projects, and I chose, as a freelancer, you're not on a career ladder. You're like, do you know what? I'm going to use the opportunity to freelance and be flexible and take my energy, because I've got loads of it, but combine that with things that I'm curious about. So I went from print into digital, then from digital into fintech, from fintech into e-commerce, all because I was curious. I spent like 6 months on a telco, so I don't know how that works, don't know how e-commerce works. I want to learn. So I worked for a retail agency. We went into automotive. It was just brilliant. So I felt my whole path was constant learning. And I think sometimes we're so guilty of just, you get in a job, you want to get promoted, or you end up being a career person rather than a curious person. And now is such a great time to be a curious person. Absolutely. But to your point, Andy, so my boys are coming up to graduating, and one of my youngest son had to do a portfolio. I was like, right, best way to do a portfolio, which is living and breathing, is build a website. So we sat and did a ChatGPT. I'm a student. I've got to build a portfolio. What's the best way I can build a website? And it went da 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 da. Great. How can I use this? Da 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 da. And it went, use this thing. How can I da da da? We literally had it set up and built in 20 minutes.
Amazing.
And it was like, so I kind of got the whole thing. I'd never built a website before. I mean, I worked with people that had engineers that built websites, but we sat there and we just did it. So he's now got a living, breathing portfolio. And then you can say, because it knows the chat write a PR release for me to launch my business, and it'll go great. It's like, so my brain works very much in a mind mappy kind of a way. I'm not a long form. I'm having to get better. I write a column now for AM, but so I do write long form, and I have a journalist that helps me, so it doesn't sound crap. But the AI modelling is so helpful to find sources of research, or for the podcast, I actually asked it to find people that are, superstars in this space. So we can start to narrow down who are the guests that we get on to help people in automotive learn from those experts. So thank you. So all of that is just really driven by, I don't know where to find it, but ChatGPT can do it. But then you have to fact check it and do all of those things. But it is such an amazing resource. And then you can build on the kind of creative space with Canva or blah, blah, blah. So I think there are some really good, it's a great way to start. If you haven't tried, listeners, go play with ChatGPT and just have a conversation with it.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, if you played with it 2 years ago and you thought it wasn't very good, the version that we have now is so different to what was there, even a year ago. So I think it's sort of, I think I know a bunch of people who kind of dismissed it out of hand and they haven't really gone back, and you're thinking, it's kind of got pretty good now.
It's pretty good now. It's learned from itself. It's trained itself. And it absolutely has learned from the algorithm. So that's all kind of really good advice. So what's next on the roadmap for you guys then? So obviously you're working, with lots of different verticals. So I think the beauty of the way that you operate is that you can get the best in class. You're I suppose being asked to innovate in lots of different industries, so you can see really what's kind of new and shiny. And learn from that.
Well, I think what's quite cool is actually, we've got customers like Charlotte Tilbury in the retail space, and then I think no offense automotive, but it's a little bit like less intensive in terms of some of the technology than some of the other industries. So I think sort of being able to take some of what we're seeing in other places and apply it in here is something that seems to be working really well. And so, I think we've got, we just signed a partnership with Keyloop. So I think we're going to be looking at how we just do a lot more in the automotive space, looking at some of the renewals AI and all the things about how we get the person the right car, right time, and make sure that they're sort of, giving people that sort of Netflix-y experience of it.
Yeah.
And then also starting to look at sort of like how we look at that sort of website pre-sales, getting people on that journey, and then sort of, automating a bunch of that inside to give people that experience. Yeah.
I think one thing we're really grateful for is that we don't do data to a point. We partner with AWS for data because actually they're global leaders in data hosting. And actually for us, having data accessible is really important. So we can then build on with other partners bits that we don't do really well. So we work with people that do that stuff really well. So it means that we then go faster because actually there's no point trying to do it yourself when someone's already done it. Just, it's much easier to go faster with other people.
Yeah.
And also Charlotte Tilbury, if you ever need a face to practice on. We keep name dropping Porsche. I'm like, no, Charlotte Tilbury, that'd be great. Get a makeover. So listen, Andy, thank you so much. I've had such an incredible hour. I need to re-listen to this about 30 times just to remind myself what we've talked about. I do re-listen to podcasts actually and then journal on the back and go, right, I need to know more about that. And I think what we'll do, we're building a playlist and in the LinkedIn pages that we have, we're linking to different resources. So we want to keep those resources up to date. So we'll keep dropping in any little, snippets that we can share about AI and where people can learn. So
sounds great.
Thanks so much. Honestly, that flew by. Andy, thank you so much for being in the studio with us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
In the next episode, be sure to tune in. We're going to bring in your co-founder and sister, Babs. So I can't wait to get Babs in the studio for the episode next week, which will be dropping in 7 days' time. And that'll be our gear change episode.